Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
All right, let's do some local sports roundup brought to you by Carpet City Flooring Center. Speaking of Carpet City Flooring Center, where do you want to start off? You want to start off with a little baseball first?
Sure,
or where are we at? So, okay, let's
taking in some baseball this week. Last night I was in Bloomer for a Western Cloverville matchup. Cadott and Bloomer. Cadott picking up the 3-2 win. Warren Bovey, St. Thomas commit. Signee will be joining in that team next year with a Division I squad with plenty of local talent on it. Had a tremendous game on the mound. Went 6+ innings, struck out 16.
Wow.
And then made a diving catch for the final catch of the game to kind of seal the win against Bloomer, a team that was at the top of the conference.
And you got a video of that, don't you?
I did, yeah. I just happened to be right place, right time. So now you got Bloomer and Fall Creek, I believe, even in the loss column, but and they'll play a couple times next week. So I mean that was one where, talking with Coach AJ Gearman after the game, he said, like, win or loss, like, we kind of knew, like, we're still going to have to play Fall Creek, and we're still going to have to beat them if we want to. They're the defending conference champions. Like, we're still going to have to do that, regardless of what happened in that game. But that's still a really big win for Cadott. A team that's got a lot of younger players, around Bovey, and a team that's really kind of starting to find itself a little bit as the year goes on here. It might be a team to keep an eye on down the stretch when you've got younger players that are starting to become productive, and then you have kind of the ultimate wild card with Bovey, who's someone who obviously can shut anyone down he faces, and also is a tremendous hitter as well. So the Western Clover, that's kind of the look of the Western Cloverville. It's been pretty even, but yeah, Bloomer and Fall Creek, Bloomer, that'll be their last two conference games of the year, I believe, next week. So they know that they still kind of control their own destiny, as the saying says. But the same can be said for Fall Creek. And then you got Regis kind of hanging out there too, looking for a little bit help if those two kind of beat up on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the Big Rivers, that's where I was Tuesday over at Carson Park for Chippewa Falls and Eau Claire North. And Chippewa Falls ended up taking both games with the Huskies this week. 15-0 on Wednesday, a 5-inning no-hitter for Chippewa Falls sophomore Sam Brazina. And then last night, a much closer game. I think a game you probably were more anticipating when these two get together, a 4-3 game, a walk-off win for the Cardinals there. But, the big thing when it comes to the Big Rivers is a big win last night for Menominee.
Yeah, against New Richmond,
New Richmond came in unbeaten in league play. I mean, Menominee, that's a team that under a Chippewa grad, Zach Sloviak, has made a lot of progress in these last few years. And picking up a 10-3 win over the Tigers last night, that kind of opens the door a little bit for some of those other teams in the Big Rivers to maybe gain a little bit of ground. Hudson, River Falls, Chippewa Falls. These teams are all within a couple games, and I know Chippewa Falls still has to play New Richmond yet. So next week Chippewa Falls plays Menominee. That'll be those two games won't be easy for either of those teams. So we're starting to kind of see a little bit of separation in there, and as we kind of start to hit the middle part of the month, these conference title races are kind of starting to develop a little bit.
Right. Softball-wise, are we kind of in that same boat, schedule-wise?
Yeah, I mean, it's roughly the same timeline, but on the softball end of the Big Rivers, Chippewa Falls, still the top spot in the Big Rivers, picked up a couple wins over Eau Claire Memorial this week.
Okay.
They've got a quad this weekend at Casper Park, and they're going to see a couple of good pitchers in there with Toma and DC Everest. I mean, those are teams that are really kind of pitching and defense led, but those are also very excellent teams. So that'll be a good test for them before next week. A couple big games. Chippewa Falls and softball does play New Richmond. Richmond won the championship last year, beat Chippewa Falls in the game to go to state. New Richmond's still kind of hot on their tail there. Like, I think it's maybe a game back. So that's a big week for the Cardinals if they want to kind of try to crystallize their spot at the top of the conference, or a big week for New Richmond as they look to maybe leapfrog Chippewa Falls. And then the Tuesday was a big night in the Western Cloverville where Fall Creek picked up a doubleheader sweep over Thorpe to keep their spot unbeaten atop the conference standings. A couple of really competitive games though. I mean, that's a good effort. In both those games out of Thorpe to be. The first game was 3-0, and the second one was 15-12. Kind of interesting. Baseball and softball are like that, where especially in softball, where you can see like the same team, and then how one game can be just dramatically different than the other. But now Fall Creek is a game and a half up on both Thorpe and McDonell with wins over both of those teams already. So they're in a good spot there. McDonell and Thorpe I know play next week.
Okay.
In a doubleheader, but that's kind of the lay of the land in the Western Clover Belt. Dunn St. Croix, kind of a similar story in that you've got Colfax up top, with Elk Mound kind of hot on their heel last night. Colfax picked up a 9-6 win over the Mounders, so that's a Vikings team. I think in Division 4 when we get to the postseason, Colfax, McDonell, I think in that part of that sectional probably going to be their two favorites. Colfax, excellent pitcher in Lake and Beyer, a team that can score some runs as well. So, I think those are two teams that, in a couple weeks when we're talking about the postseason being here in Division 4, those are, where we're going to start in D4 with Colfax and McDonell.
I know soccer-wise, I know it's not your area, but Memorial did defeat North in Big Rivers girls soccer last night.
Cross town. It doesn't matter the sport. It's always a big deal when those two schools get together. But Memorial's still hanging out near the top of the conference. River Falls and Hudson right up there with them. So we're kind of getting into the back half of the Big River season here. So and remember, I think I mentioned this last week, but once we get through the first time through conference play, the Big Rivers will actually kind of be thirded off, I guess would be the best way I would say it, where the top three teams, the middle three teams, and the bottom three teams will play each other again. Mm-hmm. So right now, obviously Memorial's in that spot, but there's some big games coming up on the horizon with Hudson, which is, that's always a battle when it comes to those two teams in boys and girls soccer, really. But and then we got a big one next week with Hudson and River Falls. Again, those are two teams that are all those three teams I mentioned at the top have not lost a game yet. Mm-hmm. There's some ties in there, but there's no losses yet. So the chance for separation will be in the standings will be coming up here.
Mm-hmm. Golf-wise, I know you were late last week, potentially going to go see some.
I was up in Bloomer. It was a little bit misty out there, but I believe Shatek Weyerhaeuser won that invitational. Obviously, it's a great program that achieved a lot last year and is still very good this year. Mm-hmm. And Monday, I was at the Big Rivers meet at Lake Wissota. Mm-hmm. And that, we're kind of getting to it. We're getting that, it was kind of a busy week there. And then Tuesday they went over to Wild Ridge and played. Menominee picked up the team championship there. Some great individual efforts all around. But yeah, we're kind of starting to get down to crunch time when it comes to golf here. Mm-hmm.
We're
kind of getting down to crunch time.
Track and field.
Similar story. So. Tonight I'm actually going to be in Stanley for Stanley Boys got an invite. So a lot of local teams will be there for that. So I'll be wandering around with my camera and chatting with some people. But yeah, track and field next week is kind of the last week of the regular season before you get to the conference meets.
Okay.
A week from Monday is the Big Rivers meet. That'll be at DeRay Field in Chippewa. And then Tuesday the Western Clover Belt meet will be at DeRay Field in Chippewa as McDonell host. So I have a pretty good idea of where I'm going to be for that. So yeah, we're kind of getting down to the home stretch of the regular season for all of these. But yeah, for track, that's that last week is always interesting to me because you have the conference meets at the beginning of that week, and then you don't really have any meets after that. So you have you're kind of getting into those last few meets where teams like to kind of see where their athletes fit best. A lot of that is what a lot of the regular season about is kind of trying athletes in different events just to see if maybe there's something there beyond that they didn't know. Because once you get to the postseason, you could compete in 4 events, but you can't change it. So like if you're in the 100 meter dash, make it out of regionals, you don't get to go to sectionals and just say, okay, I'm going to run the 400 now. Like you have up to 4 events you can be at, and then you're trying to advance the state in those events. Otherwise, you're done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else you want to hit up before I get to some Blue Golds? Blue Golds. I mentioned WIAC championships begin today for women's softball, which should be a very competitive WIAC champion or WIAC tournament. So Blue Golds will be playing Stevens Point this afternoon. Ooh. So should be a good one. All right, that's your local sports roundup, brought to you by Carpet City Flooring Center.